I'm going to go over the logic or the rationale between why we use the Pythagorean theorem and arctangent when we converted algebra XY component forms to new school trig, magnitude, and direction. So we've already established that the magnitude is nothing more than the Pythagorean theorem. So that's x squared plus y squared. Please don't forget to square root that. And the direction is going to be arctangent of y over x. Here's the reason behind it. If I wanted to find the magnitude, so for example, if this was 3, 2, old school algebra would tell us to move 3 steps to the right, 2 steps up, and we would land somewhere there. Here's my resultant vector. If I wanted to find the length of this resultant vector, since I knew I moved a specific amount to the right and a specific amount up, then this creates a right triangle, and all I'm doing is finding the length of the hypotenuse, which is why it's using the Pythagorean theorem. Now, the direction is always your reference angle, so it's always this angle between your terminal side, which is your vector, okay, and the x-axis. So I'm looking for this angle. So since I only know x and y, which is left, right, up, and down, here's x, here's y, the only trig function that will connect these two would be tangent. So that's why we always use tangent, not sine or cosine, because those would require knowing my Pythagorean theorem magnitude to begin with, which we don't need because we already have our xy opposite adjacent. Okay. The second thing we need to mention is I said this was quadrant specific. In other words, if you don't do it correctly, then your calculator won't always give you the correct answer. In fact, 1 out of 4 times it will, most of the time it will not. So again, this is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. Going back to old school algebra, x and y, left and right, up and down. If x is positive and y is positive, that means you move right and up, you're in quadrant 1. Okay, if x is negative and y is positive, left and up, you're in quadrant 2. If they were both negative, that means left and down, you're in quadrant 3. If positive, negative, that means right and down, you're in quadrant 4. If you were in quadrant 1, in other words, both of these numbers were positive, that's the only time your calculator is correct. But if you're ever in quadrant 2 or quadrant 3, and you know that just by the signs, SIGN signs of the x and y coordinates or components, then make sure you take whatever answer your calculator spits out and add 180 degrees. Okay. Then finally, if your answer or your vector is in quadrant 4, make sure you add 360 degrees. Okay. Never ever use 90 degrees or 270 degrees. Otherwise, you're not creating a reference angle with the x-axis. You're creating it with the y-axis, which is something we always want to avoid.